Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BAI Deep Dive Digital Acceleration Panel discussion. My name is Holly Hughes, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at BAI. I'll be facilitating today's discussion where three industry leaders will share their insights and perspectives on the current and future state of digital banking in the financial services industry. So I'll start with some brief intros. First, we have Tom Ormseth. He's the Executive Vice President, Digital Channels and Transaction Banking at Wintrust Financial. Welcome, Tom. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
We also have Larry McClanahan. Larry is the Chief Product Officer for Nymbus. Hi,
Hello.
Larry.
Hello.
And then finally, we have Karl Dahlgren, who is Managing Director of Research at BAI and one of my coworkers. Great to have you with us, Karl.
Thank you.
All right. So, throughout the conversation, we're going to be sharing and referencing some different research that BAI has done on this topic through our BAI Banking Outlook survey. So I'll share a few things. I know Karl is going to share that perspective, and I think that can help give us a nice consumer lens. Certainly, we've got some great financial services leaders on our panel. We'll also be able to provide those of you listening today with some consumer perspectives as well. And if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into the data that we're going to be sharing, you can always find that via BAI's website, which is bai.org. So let's go ahead and jump in. Karl, I'm going to start with you. I mentioned that BAI Banking Outlook research. And one of the stats that it showed was that 52% of consumers used digital more in 2020 during the pandemic than pre-pandemic. We certainly know that there was a large increase, and that's the percentage that our research showed. Can you talk a little bit more about how usage varied based on generation, and then also the type of financial services organizations that people bank with?
Yeah, as you would imagine, it does vary by generation, with the younger folks utilizing it more. So their step up in use of digital was greater than the step up of the older generation. So the millennials actually had the largest. They had a 70% addition. 70% of them said they were using it, using the online channel additionally because of the pandemic, versus across the board is 52%. It also varies quite a bit depending on the bank type. So the biggest share went to the direct banks, meaning those banks that don't have any branches. And that number was at 67%. And the smallest number was the smaller community banks and credit unions, which was sort of in the lower 20% tile that said that they were using it additionally. So there's no doubt that there's been a huge overnight increase in digital usage as a result of the pandemic. And, we feel that it's not going to snap back to baseline even after all the branches open up.
Yeah, thanks, Karl. I think that helps just to set the stage a little bit. And, for those who are listening to this based on the type of organization they're at, certainly saw some different behaviors with their client base. Larry, next question for you. One of the keys to delivering a strong digital experience is personalization. And we hear a lot about it. We see a lot about that. Can you share why personalization matters and some of the ways that you're seeing organizations deliver a more personalized digital experience?
Yeah, happy to, Holly. I think, first of all, personalization is different for a lot of people, but everybody wants to be known, right? Everybody wants to feel like they have a one-to-one connection with individuals, and banking's no different. And from a digital standpoint, sometimes gets a little bit challenging, a little bit tricky to do. So there's a number of different ways that we've seen personalization happen. One is, from a digital experience standpoint, you can start to configure or personalize your experience. So in allowing users to pick and choose different attributes or different experiences that's part of the homepage or part of the profile that they leverage on a very, very consistent basis. So again, allowing that configuration of that setup, while it's globally available, the things that are really important to that user, they have the ability to pick and choose and bring that higher up into their experience. The second piece is especially with the pandemic, some of the one-on-one or the personalization kind of went away as people were unable to go to the bank, or they were very, very limited on when they could go to the bank. So setting up the ability to schedule appointments or schedule one-on-ones from a phone call or from a chat session that you talked one-on-one to a banker, allowing that personalization to continue, was really, really important, or continues to be really important. And that goes across consumer banking as well as business banking, as you're trying to make sure that you're blending all of your customers together, allowing that personalization to happen not just from the experience, but how they want to interact and when they want to interact, from the digital solution to even the retail solutions out there in the marketplace right now.
Yeah, great point. And I think a lot of times we do default to consumer, when it comes to personalization. So reminding ourselves that that type of experience is just as important, for the business clients within, your bank or credit union. That's great. Tom, maybe, you could build off of Larry's comments a little bit and talk about what Wintrust is doing a little bit more specifically.
Sure. So I'll just step back and talk a little bit about what Karl talked about. We saw some of those same increases across the board, right? Probably the most interesting one we saw was our increase in Zelle. In the number of transactions and the payments. We were 130% increase year over year, and it continues to increase each month. And that really has been across all age segments. We've started to see that. So it is people wanting more digital. It is people wanting to do the payments. It is that real-time gratification, so to speak, that people want, that's matching what other applications are giving them. As far as personalization goes, I'd go along the same lines of some of the things Larry said, that today or in the past, you had that personalization that let the customer pick that personalization. You'd give them different capabilities. You'd have different widgets on the screen that they could move around. You could pick that. You could pick the alerts that you want in that side. So the other thing was personal financial management that fell into that, right? So you could set up budgeting. They could pick budgeting tools. They could see where their money's being spent. And I think the next evolution inside that is really what's called personal financial experience, which is the next step. So I equate it to Google, that when you go out and Google and you do a search on Google, it come back with 15 different answers, thinking that, it's not just the question you ask, but okay, what's the question after that? What's the question after that? So they try and present that. So a personal financial experience is banks with their data now, looking at that data and saying, okay, what might benefit this customer financially? Is it putting $10 away? Are they saving for a boat? Are they saving for a car? Is the interest rate they have too high if it's someplace else? So it's those kinds of things that we think is the next evolution in the personalization, is that we're being more proactive in helping our customers than necessarily reactive. And I think you're starting to see some of that come about.
Excellent. And all this did happen so fast, certainly in terms of the pandemic's effect on digital behavior. It's March. And as we think back on March last year, how quickly those branches closed, and people, were really forced into that channel. The BAI research, had some interesting learnings in terms of how people learn to use their bank or credit union's digital platform, maybe for the first time, or relearn. Karl, you want to talk a little bit about what you saw there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of their how they've learned how to use the application, especially the mobile applications, banks have really done a good job there, right? So we've done some research and found out that, while functionality and features and different availability of products and things like that is important, but really what people want is to have an easy to use experience, and banks have done well. 67% of people figured out how to use their applications on their own. So it's like opening up an iPhone box and picking it up and figuring out how to use it. And then when you go to some of the younger generations, actually do use video. So there was a fair amount of folks, 23% that used videos and other tools, tutorials that banks put out there. And then very few, less than 10%, actually would contact the call center and ask for questions about how to use applications. So it's really kind of, as a self-taught environment. That's good in a couple ways, right? So that it's less cost associated with it. It shows that bankers are really figuring out how to develop intuitive tools. The downside to that is it's less sticky because people can figure out how to pick up other tools quite quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And Tom, when we think about, more specifically the online account opening and the onboarding process. That can be one of the big pain points still, I think, for some consumers. What is Wintrust doing to help make sure that that's a really, positive, strong experience?
Well, and so we have online account opening. We saw a 5-fold increase in customers opening accounts through that, through 2020. So good ramp up on that side of it. But again, that experience, that personal experience, right? Making it more efficient, as Karl talked about. You should be able to take a picture of a driver's license, pre-autofill it, so that they're not doing all this keying. You should be able to keep opening account in the 4 or 5 minute range at maximum. So it's really being a more intuitive design. Also moving to more of a shopping cart, right? So they can do more than one account at a time. So you're not opening a checking account and got to start the process over to open a savings account and continually doing that. So it is making it more efficient for that customer, much easier for them to get up and running. And then at the end of it, you should be able to have online banking ready for them. You should have a card shipped out to them. If they want instant issue and stop by a branch, they can do it. Really, any way they want to bank with you at that point, you should be able to support.
Yeah, for sure. And, we talk a lot in some of our other digital thought leadership and with some of the executive roundtables we do that, what consumers do with other types of companies, Amazon and every other experience has set the bar so high. So it's great to see that you guys are looking at, taking that to the next level, which is really good.
Holly,
I
might just tag on to Tom's comment there. When we did some research, the number one thing that bankers are investing in is the digital experience. And the number two is connecting systems on the back end, right? And why are they doing that? Essentially because the customers do want personalization. So their expectation is if they provided you with information in one area of the bank, then when you go to apply for some other product in some other area of the bank, that if they've supplied that information already, that it could pre-populate. So having that sort of data connected across the bank is a really important part of what bankers are spending money on these days.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for mentioning that, Karl.
And jumping in, I'll jump into that a little bit more. So it's not just for the customer, right? So again, we talked about that our customers should be able to deal with us the way they want, whether it's through a call center, whether it's coming in the branch. But that should be a consistent experience with what they're doing digitally, with what they get from that call center, and what they get for that banker. So it should all tie together. And Karl's right. We are building back systems to tie everything together. We are making it that it's a consistent approach across all channels of the bank. Really important to customers that they get a similar experience, and it's not 5 different experiences they have to learn as they're going on, as well as our bankers. Our bankers are much more likely to help the customer, to be enthusiastic about helping that customer too, if they have that kind of experience.
Yeah, it feels like you can't use, it's a legacy system, we've got a problem with that anymore, that's just not acceptable, right?
Right.
Good. Larry, you had mentioned small business, prior. We've talked a lot about consumers. What other, opportunities do you see to improve the experience for small business customers?
First, all small business customers are also consumers. So their first experience is on the consumer. So if they're digital users from a consumer standpoint, the things that Tom and Karl talked about fold into the business experience as well. Their expectations are already high, or should be high, of how the digital experience should be for the business consumer as well as it is for the consumer as well. So from an account opening standpoint, really to piggyback a little bit on what Tom said, it should be automated as much as possible. So the same rules for KYC of automation and scanning in your driver's license or scanning in your business information, so it's automatically reviewed, so you don't have a lot of back office processes to validate that. It should be part of the business experience as well. And then as you go through that process, the automation of giving them their credentials so they can leverage the online tools or the mobile tools as much as possible from the onset should be part of that experience. And to build a little bit on what Karl said, that kind of the back end integration, because that many of them are consumers as well as small business owners, you need to combine those profiles to make it really, really easy for them to manage their total relationship and not have to manage each individual separately. And all that data is readily available to make sure that we do, on the back end standpoint, combine those solutions and then present the next best solution for the customers as they're their journey with their financial institutions continues to evolve and develop.
Great. Yeah, important reminders that your opening line about their consumers, and how that feels across, both parts of their lives. So great point. And certainly, Karl, I'll go back to you. While digital has accelerated, the branches still play an important role in servicing customers. And the BAI research asked about consumers' preferred methods of interaction based on the transaction after the pandemic is over, or we're in our new normal, now normal, whichever buzzword you want to use. What trends did you see in that type of data in the research?
Well, as you can imagine, when folks first adopt online banking, right, they generally do the simpler tasks, right? So transferring some funds, looking at your balance, things like that. But then the pandemic happened, and they were forced to do sort of more complicated type of transactions online. The branch still remains the preferred method for many sort of more difficult interactions. So like, applying for a loan, opening a deposit, honestly. I mean, now, we saw numbers, we follow it in our benchmarking programs on a monthly basis. We saw numbers that just popped in March. And it was multiple fold. So, you'd maybe 20-30% of accounts were opening online, and it like tripled in, overnight. And then it came back down in the summer when some of the branches started to relax and open up again. So the branch is still a preferred method for some of the more complicated transactions. But, so for example, applying for a loan, okay, it was 47%. I answered that applying for a loan, branch was their preferred method. That's gone down to 41% since the pandemic. For opening a deposit was 46% was the branch. That went down to 40%. Getting advice about sort of complicated products and services, it was 45% was the branch, and then that's dropped down to 32%. So you can see that there are generations, in particular, if you look at sort of the baby boomers that grew up with branches and were less used to using the digital channels, they were forced to adopt the digital channels. And once they did, they became comfortable with them. And so we see a trend in the drop of the numbers, and it's going deeper into the types of transactions. So the more complicated transactions are now being performed online and using the mobile apps.
Right. And Tom, in some previous conversations we had, you talked about Wintrust having both a high touch and high tech approach. Can you talk a little bit more about leveraging, both digital and physical channels? So Karl kind of set that up, that there is still absolutely a place for physical, and how you're looking at both together.
Yeah. So, I keep hearing we're a $46 billion bank, right? And I keep hearing how we can't compete in this space. We're just at the wrong size. We're not there. We think we compete very well. And it is that high tech, high touch, we call it. So you have to have the technology, you have to have the mobile products, you have to have the digital products that are out there. But customers still do want to come into the branch. We still see it. We've seen a decrease, but we're starting to see a little bit of an increase again now in some of the branch traffic. Our philosophy is the customer should be able to bank the way they want to. If they want digital, they can have digital. If they want call center, they can call center. If they want to talk to one of our bankers, they should be able to talk to one of our bankers. Larry talked about online appointment scheduling. That's been put in place. So it's really just looking at that across the board about how that customer wants to be dealing with us. The other side, tied to that, and some of the things we're doing is I can't compete on technology alone with the bigger banks. I agree with that. But I'm involved in my communities. I'm more deeply involved in my communities from the social aspect. We still think there's a large number of people out there that want to know their bank is giving back to the community, is involved in the community. That's as much of a focus as us as digital, is what are we doing in the communities? How are we supporting the communities? How are we letting people bank with us on that side of it? So we think we're going to compete really well in the marketplace coming forward because of that culture and the way we're allowing our customers. We're not pushing to a chat bot. We want to see people if they want to see us.
Yeah, great point of differentiation for sure. Larry, how about strategies that you're seeing as it relates to humanizing the digital experience? And maybe a two-parter too. I'd love to, through your lens, where do you see this going? What are you talking about, with your clients, 2 to 3 years down the road? What does the future look like?
Yeah, first, Tom, I think you're the perfect size bank, by the way. I think that it's a combination of local as well as kind of technology solutions out there that's going to make a difference in banking. Because I don't think there's one size that fits all. I think customers really want to look for that personal relationship. We use the term niche is the new local quite a bit. As we're exploring new solutions. And what we mean by that is everybody's looking for that kind of that one-to-one community relationship as much as they possibly can find. And finding that niche out there, either if it's a community aspect or if it's a specific service or an attribute or it's a segment of the market, there's all kinds of opportunities where there's niche solutions that the customers aren't being served because it is a lot of one-stop shopping or one-size-fits-all type of approach. And with these niche solutions, each of them have a different hook, or they have a kind of a different catch that makes their experience become personalized, or makes their experience become more one-on-one of this is something that's really, really important to me. So the more that we find from a digital standpoint, or just from a general banking standpoint, these niche solutions that data tells us that they're not being served the right way, and data tells us that there's a larger opportunity to go find these individualized solutions, I think the better we're going to be able to serve the individual customer. And that's, Holly, to your second point of your question, really that's where we think that it's going, is finding those hooks out there and finding unique services. If it's a customer that's goal oriented, right? A young couple that's just starting their life together, they have goals of a home, they have goals of a new car or vacations. And how do you set up goals, or how do you set up solutions to allow them to save? If you have an individual who just graduated from college and they're straddled with financial debt from their student loan, how do you help them pay that off with services that are out there? Or do you have intergenerational wealth transfer? Is you're transferring wealth from one generation to the other? How do you create solutions that are really personalized or niche oriented to meet those type of needs in the marketplace? That's where we really think that again, going back to that statement, niche is the kind of the new local, finding those niche solutions to find personalized local solutions for your customers.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, the acceleration continues for sure. So kind of last question, Karl, I'll go back to you. Certainly, metrics matter, measuring digital activity and these strategies to determine, are they moving the needle? Are they successful? In addition to the BAI Banking Outlook research that you've been sharing, Karl, which is more that consumer view, we also do benchmarking with the top banks. And, curious if you could share what you're seeing banks look at, just to help folks who are listening in have an eye towards what they should be measuring and keeping an eye out for.
Yeah, so thank you, Holly. We gather account level data from about the top 45 banks in the US. It's anonymous, and then we aggregate it. And we have approximately 60 to 70%, depending on whether it's a dense market or otherwise, of the deposits in the US. As you can imagine, deposits have grown significantly. So many banks, they're awash in deposits. So as we present data around deposit growth and customer growth, there was a time where that was a big focus. Now it's really a lot about two things. One is the online usage. So to what degree are my customers adopting online? How am I performing in that space? Tom brought up one, Zelle, and the use of P2P payments has been a big area of interest. And then finally, the quality of the customer base. So, are you the primary bank for the customer? And what types of customers do you have? How well ingrained are you with those customers? Have you cross-sold with those customers? And that's been a big level of importance. That certainly, as we enter into this phase of, there's been some pent-up M&A activity in the banking space. And so sort of understanding your portfolio and the quality of that portfolio is really important right now.
Great. All right, thanks, Karl. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our conversation. I think we covered a lot of interesting ground. You guys brought up some really great points. So Karl, Larry, Tom, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. And thanks to all of you who are watching. I hope that there are some takeaways. It caused you to think about what you're doing in this area, maybe some opportunities for you, some things that can help you take your digital strategies to the next level. And you can continue to follow this topic and others on BAI.org. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.